Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by BarrheadBoy.
And welcome to our second video show of Through a Scottish Prism. Welcome, folks. I hope you're all well. I hope you're keeping out of mischief, because we're not, as you can probably see on the screen here. I've got my two main compadres with me for today's show, namely Jegget and Ian Lawson. Gentlemen, good evening. How are we?
Oh, we're good.
We're good. I've had a severe talk with the dogs. They've been warned that if they appear in this programme, it won't be a dog licence it'll be going for, it will be cards for equity.
There we go. Yeah. I believe they're demanding very large dressing rooms for the future.
Yes, exactly. I mean, the food bill this week has been horrendous. Fillet steak, it's outrageous.
Divas, we've got enough divas as it is. So, gentlemen, it's been a heck of a week. Quite a lot going on, quite a lot to talk about. And I suppose the best place to start is some of the events this week. And I don't think the opening of Parliament was the biggest event in the Scottish conditions. I think the biggest one was Kenmure Street. What were your views on that? Well, what did you think on that, Jason?
Oh, I was tickled pink by it. I just thought it was a great juxtaposition between all of our elected representatives, well dressed, well spoken, in the finest, in Holyrood, swearing allegiance to the Queen of England, as Glasgow was getting into rebellion mode. To quote George Galloway, it was a rebellion. The first correct thing he has said in a few years. It was a monumentous moment, and I thought the aerial photography of Kenmure Street was just, it tickled me pink.
I've got to admit, I had a big lump in my throat, especially when they opened the van doors and the crowd started cheering. You know, it was like as if a goal had been scored. It was absolutely wonderful. What about you, Ian? How did you take it?
Well, I thought it was a very encouraging sign. You know, it's really good when the public decide to lead political debate rather than politicians. Apart from anything, it tends to be a lot more honest and open, you know. And there was no doubting the message the good people of Glasgow were sending to Miss Patel down in Westminster. It was, we're having none of it, you know. And if you come up here and try to, it'll be the people that will rebel. And I hope that's a signal, not just to Westminster, but to Holyrood, that they need to get their act out. The people are showing they're willing to go further than the politicians here in Scotland in defending the rights. You know, and our rights are under attack. Make no mistake, this was a very provocative move by the Home Secretary, picking on a constituency she knew just shortly after the election was Nicola Sturgeon's constituency. She was trying to send a signal. And like all good cowboy movies, the Indians in Glasgow literally shot up our cavalry and sent them back with their tail between their legs. It was absolutely excellent.
Absolutely.
And it was the ugly, cynical move, and the cynical and dirty nature of it happening on, you know, the feast of Eid al-Fitr. You know, when Muslims have just finished Ramadan, when they're with their families. There was something quite deliberate and horrible, calculated and ugly about it. And I thought that's where Glasgow really comes into its own, as they were just not willing to tolerate any of it. No. Even when the British press was calling them a mob. You know, I see, you know, some enterprising character hung a banner out of his window, you know, if this is, what was it, if this is global Britain or something, you know, count me out. I thought, we reject it. I thought, beautiful. I think that's become the banner picture across the entire independence movement on Twitter now, you know. If this is the future of Britain, we reject it. You know, fair play to Glasgow.
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, it was certainly a cynical move by London. They were trying to say, you might be opening your wee tin pot parliament and you might have got your wee victory SNP, but we're in charge. And the Glasgow people said, no, you're no. We're in charge. You know what I mean? You know, the terrorists knew. They get taught a lesson. They came to Glasgow and tried to have a wee they get taught a lesson. Obviously, London wasn't paying attention. They've just been sent a lesson. And every time you come up, Priti Patel, you'll get the same and more. And I'm like you, Ian. I'm hoping that this is the spark that the Scottish people are not going to take anymore. The politicians can play their bloody games as much as they like, but the people are saying enough's enough.
Yep, absolutely. And I mean, it's what a lovely position to be in when we're being led by the people. You know, I know Nicola turned up later on, but I mean,
I was all over then.
I think she admitted she'd made 7 or 8 phone calls, you know, and nobody would talk to her. I mean, she was being treated, you know, with complete and utter contempt. Humza Yousaf was similarly in the same situation. So, I mean, at the end of the day, the politicians were useless in this situation. It was resolved by the people in a dignified way. There was no violence. There was absolutely no violence. No. It was what was perfect civil disobedience, which is an absolute legitimate tactic to be employed. It was very well run, very well behaved. You could look in at the crowd. There was people of all ages, of all creeds, of all colour there. You know, a united community saying, no, it's not going to happen here today.
And most of them masked up as well, we should hasten to add.
Maybe not for the reasons they should have been masking up, but they were masked up. That's what counts.
Yeah, but we were talking last week, and we've had private discussions in the Dog and Duck and elsewhere, but saying the same, that civil disobedience is what we've got to do as part of the panacea for getting independence. You know, the ballot box isn't going to get it alone.
Every single time that there is direct action, that there's civil disobedience, it mobilises the whole of the rest of Scotland. And not just the independence movement. The amount of quote-unquote soft-nose fence-sitters, the apolitical, you know, who were watching what was happening in Glasgow and who were getting excited. You know, that when direct action happens, when one person stands up and puts it to the man, another 40 gather behind them and feel encouraged to do the same. And no doubt what happened in Glasgow, I mean, I never saw any footage of the beginning of it, but no doubt this started off with a van arriving, with the Home Office thugs arriving and knocking on a door, and one wee guy or one wee woman stood out in the lobby door and said, "Hey, what you doing?" Got on the WhatsApp. All of our mates were there. And then, you know, it's mushrooms into this thing, you know, and that's the power of direct action. And at the same time, you know, you were saying about the politicians just being ignored. I get blocked by the MP for the area, Chris something or other, SNP as well, because he had, you know...
Nicholas, that's Nick, the MP,
right? The MP, a few hours later, you know, he had tweeted, you know, oh, the horror of this happening on Eid Mubarak. And he blocked me for reminding him the holiday is not called Eid Mubarak. That's like saying our, you know, winter holiday is called Merry Christmas. You know, it's Eid. Eid Mubarak is how you wish someone, you know, it was that lack of awareness. And in Glasgow, of all places, you know, how many of his constituents are Muslim? And he didn't know that basic thing about, you know, his Muslim constituents and their faith and their culture. I reminded him of that, and his response was just to block me. You know, you can't be telling these people their jobs.
No, they're kind of precious, aren't they? They're kind of precious.
Precious.
But they're the very people, the precious people, the very ones that the good people of Glasgow are quick to tell. Not in our name. But they'll come back. Priti Patel won't go away. They'll come looking to exert the English imperialist, you know, big jackboot all over us again soon.
Well, I would say, you know, the Home Office came to take prisoners, but it was the great people of Glasgow that decided, no, we're not taking prisoners today. They weren't given any quarter to their own politicians or to the thugs. And I think, you know, we rarely see this here in Dublin, you know, the police getting such an applause. When those doors opened, that was choreographed. I'm sure they planned. It was so cinematic. The door opens, out comes these triumphant guys. I thought, what? Yeah, I mean, as you said, it was like a goal being scored. Everyone erupted. Wonderful.
It wasn't as they marched up the street. It was. I mean, I watched it, I'm not kidding when I say I had a big lump in my throat of pride.
I bet you those guys never felt as proudly, and I'm talking about the guys getting out the van, that they never felt as proudly part of Glasgow as they had up until that moment.
Well, I saw an interview after with what the guy, and he was saying that. He said, "I'm so glad we came to Glasgow," because if it had been, dare I say it, and it's, whether you like it or not, it's true. If it had been down south of the border, they would have been applauding the border guards. And the police, and they would have been helping to push the van up the street. That's just the truth. That's just the reality.
Well, some places south of the border, but you can imagine that happening in somewhere like Rochdale or Luton. So many of the locals would have been throwing petrol bombs at the van. But to be fair to England, there's a few places in England would have reacted very similarly. But every reason to be proud of Glasgow.
I think the other people that came out of this with some credits, the police handled it very sensibly. They made absolutely clear they were not there to support the work of the border people. They were there just simply to make sure the crowd were safe and there was no incident of violence. So I mean, the message from the police was a very welcome one, and I think they will do better in that area of Glasgow in terms of cooperation with the public.
Absolutely.
Because of the fact they were so far-sighted about how it should be ruled and regulated.
Yeah, but the other thing to go to, these two guys, I believe, have been here for 10 and 11 years respectively.
Yep.
And it just shows you how ridiculous the UK immigration laws are. It's just, after that period of time, you would think there'd be some kind of amnesty. I mean, with certain crimes, after 7 years, the crime, you can't be caught for crime and certain debts. So for goodness sake, let's fix it and make an arrangement. But I put out a tweet saying it just goes to show that Scotland is a colony. And some people, no, how dare you say that? Scotland is not a colony. I said, well, if they're not a colony, why is the English Home Secretary deciding who can stay in the ancient nation of Scotland and who cannot? Yeah. That's just the reality. We are a colony.
We need people to come and stay in Scotland. Otherwise, we would have a very serious problem with an ageing population. I mean, this is a problem in the United Kingdom. It's one rule to fix all, but the circumstances between the need for immigrants in Scotland and the need for immigrants in areas of England are chalk and cheese. Absolutely chalk and cheese.
Well, we're missing something, I think, quite crucial in this. With the whole Brexit and right to remain or right to stay in the UK, there's very few Home Office vans rock up to the houses of white German nationals as New Scots.
Yep.
Was it just a coincidence that these two boys were brown and Muslim? Is that, there's a very clear message there. The tin van rocks up, almost like these clearances in a ghetto in the 1940s. These vans rock up and they're targeting brown people. There's a clear difference in how a German or a French national or a US national, or might I say an Israeli national? I don't know. There's a clear difference in how they get evicted. So there's a racial element to this, and we're seeing this coming right through English politics that's being imposed in Scotland. And I think that there was something beautiful in the visceral reaction of your average Glaswegian and Scots all over the country that said, no, these are Scots. These are new Scots, and they're staying. We're not liking what you're doing.
Immigration is a huge issue and about to become a much bigger one here because Scotland has a very burgeoning fruit industry. And, it's not so many weeks before a lot of that fruit requires to be picked. And there's a big problem because the East Europeans, who normally come in huge numbers and pick that fruit, they are not coming.
Yeah.
They are not coming. And you can't, from what I'm reading, the fruit producers are really struggling to get anyone willing to go and do the work because it's hard work and it's low paid work and it's long hours, and not everyone in Scotland is willing to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing that was said, I was listening to Nicola a while ago, or someone from the Scottish Government was saying, we need more people to come here and we need more babies. So, I mean, if you're saying, well, they want us to go there and they're wanting babies. I'm the man for that job. I can do that. Pick a bit of fruit while I'm at it, no bother. But you're saying there about, oh, is it only white people? Well, actually, no, I was reading a couple of articles today, Jason. There was a woman, an Italian woman, who was treated appallingly and put in a detention centre from Gatwick. And there was the Mexican lady who was coming for an interview, and she had all the paperwork for an interview, but they found her boyfriend. She's got a boyfriend here, so she then offered to pay her own plane. I think it was to fly to Croatia or something. And they said, no, and stuck her on a plane and fired her back across the Atlantic to Mexico. It's ridiculous, and it's bizarre, and it's horrible, and I just find it quite disgusting.
Well, to me, if we look at this word home, and Scotland is our home, one of the best definitions I have of home is your starting place and your final destination. If your home is where you are the person in charge of extending a welcome to guests, oh, we have a guest on the show. If your home is where you are the person who extends the welcome, and in our nation we're being told that we can't extend that welcome, maybe it's the Home Office and the Westminster government we should tell to sling the hook. You're not welcome here. Get lost.
Completely agree.
Roddy's gone on mute.
No, I'm getting distracted. I can't go swimming just now. Sorry. Wait and see your gran. I've lost the plot there, boys. Someone else will have to step in and help me when I get back in here.
Roddy, you lost the plot a good while ago.
Well, that's true. I know I was going to say it was you were talking about what happened in Kenmure Street and how that enthused the people, but it was the same reaction a while back in the Parliament when 2018, when Ian Blackford walked out and took the MPs with him, and 5,000 members joined the SNP within a week. The Scottish people want you to fight back. They don't like bullying. They don't want bullies. So that's what's needed. So we have to look at other forms of civil disobedience, I believe, to start moving things along.
And this is why All Under One Banner, I think, is doing it very well right now. Now is the time to hit the streets again. And we can do that like Kenmure Street. We can do it masked up. We can do it with social distancing. But we need to be active now more than ever. Because if the situation, as Stu Campbell has spelled out, is that this is now a long-term, goal, if we're on a much longer journey, then we need to make sure that journey has an awful lot of marching and an awful lot of drums being beat. We've got to be an activist movement, because movements that stop moving aren't movements anymore.
No, you're right. And on the Stu Campbell, it was a beautiful bit of dovetailing there. That was very, very, very good. You probably didn't mean it.
That's why you invite me here, Roddy.
But that's another thing that's happened this week. And I know, Ian, you've got a particular view on really with Stu Campbell, and I've got to say that I felt with Stu's, it was a great article, although a sad outcome, because I think he's one of our best assets, always has been, and will be sadly missed from our community of independence seekers. But you've got a particular view on it, haven't you, Ian?
I have indeed. I mean, I'm actually writing about it in my blog on Monday, but there is going on at the moment an active group of people who are intent in falsely accusing any political opponents. And their scheme is quite simple. They make a whole series of false allegations in the sure knowledge that the person they're accusing has already lost the minute that's done, because he has to employ at his expense legal advice, and his reputation is damaged. He is out a huge sum of money, even when he's proven completely innocent at the end. Now, if that happens once, that's sad. If it happens twice, it's suspicious. But I can think of 3 or 4 cases in recent times where those tactics have been employed. And I'm also aware, or at least I suspect, they come from the same group of people. that are responsible for this. So I think we need to, as bloggers, we need to be very aware of this, because there is no doubt there was an attempt made last week to put false allegations against Stu Campbell. And being a fair-minded guy, I am willing to accept wee Ginger Doug's explanation that he was merely given false information. But no doubt that information came from people who were hoping that wee Ginger Dog would publicise that false allegation and kick off the problems for Stuart Campbell. Now, fortunately, the woman concerned made absolutely clear there was no issue at all with Stuart Campbell. There had been a relationship, but it was entirely consensuous. So I mean, we really need to be on our toes. And I'm going to be suggesting on Monday one of the things we can do, and I'll put some money to it to hopefully kickstart it. But we need to know who these people are, and we need to take action in court against them. Now, to do that, we need evidence, and what my blog is going to start off as an appeal for that evidence. But, I'm not beyond employing a detective agency if that's what's required. I will not sit back and be a willing target for these people. And they've got to worry, Roddy. They've got to worry, because when they look around their group, how well do they know the rest of their group? How can they be sure these people will always be on the same side, your friend? It only takes one of them to be overcome with guilt or some other dispute with the rest of the group to blow the lid in the lot. And then there could be very serious consequences, not just for the person that's fingered, but for their close circle of friends and associates if they're well known. So it's a very dangerous game that's getting played, and I hope we can take some steps to resolve it.
There is certainly a pattern in the behaviour that would make me suspicious. It's a very similar MO, going for someone's private life, digging into that. And what struck me was the question of competence. That, as someone who works, with vulnerable people and with, as a manager of other people's, secrets, for lack of a better term, when something comes, to my attention that would be potentially illegal or abusive, or if a vulnerable person is in danger, I don't have the competence to investigate that. I don't have the competence to then phone up a third party and say, excuse me, can you tell me what he or she did to you? That is the job of the police. Now, sadly, this is what happened in the case with Stu Campbell, and it's very clear that this is what happened in the case with Alex Salmond, that once the investigation by the police was open, there was still a private investigation going on in this fishing expedition of contacting women and, pretending, these people aren't social workers. They're not psychologists. They're not trained to deal with this level of trauma. Rape and sexual abuse are serious issues, and they're very damaging for individuals. And in cases where this is, established on a true event, something that actually happened, I don't have the competence to sit down with a victim and try and interrogate them and that's not my job. The fact that the SNP did this, and the fact, sadly, that Paul Kavanagh seems to have done this, well, this is a commonality. It's a same profile of behaviour. They shouldn't have done that. If this came across Paul Kavanagh's desk, and to give him the benefit of the doubt, he may have been acting, I suspect he was acting with the very best of intentions, but what he should have done was contact the police. I think there's a young woman being, in danger here or being abused. Could you do a welfare check? It was no one else's job to make a phone call. That's chaotic.
I'm probably more cynical than you two. I don't believe in any coincidences, especially in politics. But I'll give the benefit of the doubt. But to say if you've got a wee dog and you throw a stick for it, it will collect it and bring it back if you've got it trained. But it was disgusting, and it was a bit of a loss. It's a huge loss to the independence movement that Stu Campbell feels at present that he hasn't got the motivation to go. Now, I fully understand it. I absolutely understand it. That guy has been taking a battering for a long time from a lot of people who should have been allies, and a lot of it's based on jealousy from some rather inferior so-called bloggers and journalists. And I do hope he comes back into it, but it has brought about something else this week we'll be going on to and explain to you in greater detail, ladies and gentlemen. The Scottish Free Media, Ian, which is, I've got to say, is an idea of ours. And perhaps you'd like to explain to our listeners and viewers what we're up to.
Yeah, well, there was a meeting online last week of a lot of the most prominent bloggers in Scotland, and there was general agreement that in the light of the fact that some of us, indeed probably all of us, are under attack in one shape or form, then we should probably unite, and put together an organisation that makes absolutely abundantly clear that if you attack one, you attack all. We are, probably politically dangerous to say this, we are about to become the NATO of the blogging world. We have no territorial ambitions, but we're not going to get stood on. And it's as simple as that.
Ian, you have no territorial ambitions. You're speaking for yourself there. I've marked out my territory and I want it.
But I thought Ireland was already yours, but there you go.
Most of it. I'm working on the other 6 counties.
If it was in my gift, I would give you it, Jason. I certainly would. No, but I mean, I think it's an important step forward because blogging is, by its very nature, quite individualistic. But at the same time, MD as a blogger recognises the effort and the work and dedication that goes in to providing a regular blog on particularly the subject of politics. So, I think anything we can do to encourage blogging, because let's face it, in Scotland, the absolute mainstream media is never going to be a friend of independence. They may be bought for a general election with a £3 million gift, but they are no long-term allies of independence. And when and if any electoral test comes in the form of a referendum, they will not be on our side. So it's very much in Scotland's interest to build up the blogging community, to try and build that audience, that voice, that independent voice that examines what's happening and defends the right.
Yeah, I've got to say that we're now going to be referring to ourselves as the Scottish Free Media. What I really liked about it, I got, like we all did, got speaking to people who I'd never spoken to before. I had read some articles, but I really hadn't spoken, and I was very impressed actually with the people and their commitment and the quality of the writing and their quality to continue fighting and fighting as one. And we intend to do ongoing shows, ladies and gentlemen, where we will introduce each and every one of those. We'd hoped to do it this weekend, but for all sorts of different reasons, we weren't able to do it. But we're going to bring those people so that you should know them, that you'll meet them, you'll get to know them. And I am certain when you get to meet some of these people that you will certainly be putting it onto your reading list. We've all got to help out each other, all of us that believe in the independence cause, not just by the civil disobedience, but by sharing the word and supporting each other throughout everything. And I expect it to go from strength to strength, and we will be looking for shows. And that's for any of you listening in on this as well. If you're, of that bent that you fancy, you'd like to do a wee bit of writing, a bit of blogging about this, get in touch. Yeah, absolutely. Or if you want to, we're going to be using this channel quite a lot for doing all sorts of shows. So if you fancy yourself as a bit of a presenter, let us know. We're looking for people because, while you would obviously want the three of us on the screen all the time,
Absolutely.
I mean, obviously, But yeah, it would be good to get some more people helping out so we can use this and have shows that you want, and we'll be doing that. So,
and it's the type of media that anyone can get involved in,
mm-hmm.
and that has its pros and its cons. I mean, one of the cons is, that anyone can be involved in this means that we are wide open to the mainstream media to attack us as a bunch of cranks and lunatics. But the one thing we've got going for us is the comment section. There is no comments in the Daily Record article. There's no peer review. There's no weighing of the evidence and no right of reply. Not really. Whereas the one benefit I found is, of course, I make mistakes sometimes. Sometimes I get a little too hot-headed and I fire off a few things that upset a few people. Very rarely, in fairness, that I would upset other people. But my comment section...
That's my job.
My comment section is open. If I get it wrong, if I miss the mark, you can drop me a line and tell me. In fact, Peter Bell does it every week. We're entirely open, so there is a self-correcting thing there. And it was great there to meet the other bloggers there the other night. The skill set there was fantastic. We had former journalists, we had academics, we had professionals. We're not talking about stupid people.
Well, not apart from us three.
Well, us three, okay, fine. But, we can't be that stupid. If, what was it? I heard about George W. Bush back in the day. He may have been a silly man, but he was clever in getting the best advice. We can be the Three Stooges all we want, but if we can gather new blood and competent people who are up to the job, then that will be a fantastic service to Scotland and to the movement that we are part of.
Mm-hmm. And ongoing, there was also this week, there was a statement from Alapa Party that they are not going away, which will be music to some people's ears and not so sweet to other people's ears. And they're going to hold a conference. Although I was reading today the conditions to get back into the UK from here, for example, for me, I don't think I'll be attending unless they change the rules and we get back into the country. But anyway, the Alapa statement was very encouraging, where Alec was talking about over 5,000. I'm hearing it's a lot more than that now. They're maybe, I think, saving it up. I hear we're over 6,000 members, councillors, etc., and the fight goes on. That must have cheered you up, guys.
Oh, look, the more... We seem to forget here that only a few years ago, the Green Party were shouting and screaming, and making a big fanfare about the more list parties and the more parties in Scotland, the better. But they quickly changed their tune on that when Alapa appeared. But this is the nature of democracy. In every democracy, there's going to be a remainder, a constituency of people who don't find political representation in whatever parties are there. Now, clearly, there isn't a split. I don't believe that there's a split in the independence movement. I think that there are millions of splits in the independence movement, that we can't all possibly be represented with the ideology and politics of one party. And that party has never really served my politics. When they go looking to make deals with the bankers and the international corporations, I'm thinking, well, doesn't really suit me, lads. That I would have a different vision of independence. So of course, the more parties, the better. So while I reserve the right to be critical, I'm going to look at the SNP. We've been getting an awful lot of missiles thrown at us because of our critical stance in the SNP recently. But I reserve the right to be critical of the SNP and of Alapa, as much as I reserve that right to be critical of the Tories, the Labour, the Lib Dems and the Greens and whoever else. That is our job. We're rational people and we're here to make comment. And, I'm delighted Alapa's staying. I want another 5 of these parties to appear.
Well, you've got the ISP and you've got Scotia Future as well, and AFI.
And AFI, yeah.
I think what the point I would make is when I was the vice convener in charge of the SNP's administration and fundraising, the membership at that time, now this is the mid-80s, was round about 8,000 or 9,000. Right? So all these SNP people are throwing abuse,
You're tiny.
5,000 or 6,000 after 8 weeks. You know, they really need to have a look at the history books.
Well, what was the SNP's membership 8 weeks after it was founded? 7, 8?
Well, I don't know, but it took them 11 years to win their first seat, and then a further 22 years after that to win another first seat, because the first seat they only held for a matter of months.
April to July.
You know, so, I mean, what we're talking about here is chalk and cheese, you know, and, you know, we've got more members than the Liberals. Nobody's suggesting the Liberals should back off. Perhaps one or two. But, I mean, the bottom line is, you know, a lot of the best people in the SNP left and joined Alba. Real, true activists, the people that did a lot of the work, and that was absolutely evident during the general election. Okay, it wasn't successful this time round, but I mean, we were facing quite extraordinary barriers.
And the level of paranoia in the SNP after the return of Joanna Cherry. Joanna Cherry announced a few weeks ago that she was taking time out because of ill health. She never joined ALIPA. As far as I know, there was no discussions in that. But the moment that she reappeared into the SNP after a period of ill health, the SNP activists who rounded on her, attacked her, and abused her. And yet these are the same people who are finding it really difficult to understand why some of the best people in the SNP have run out of the SNP. It's like the place is a toxic dump.
Well, the other point I would make about the 80s and 90s was there was an enormous division in the SNP between the
Symphony Group
and the Fundies at that time. It was held together with very skillful leadership and sensible leadership by Gordon Wilson. He held that party together. I mean, he was obviously people like Winnie Ewing alongside him and others, but there was cool heads, and they recognised that there was effectively two parties, but neither would be successful on their own. That was the belief. And, you know, when you've only got 7 or 8,000 members, if you had a split, it would be devastating, probably. But, I mean, it was held together. And the problem Nicola has, and I mean, this will never go away now, she is the first leader that has been responsible, not for one new independence party been set up, but 4 new independence parties. I mean, one's careless, two's a bit silly, but, you know, and if she carries on the way she's doing, there could be both hands in use by the time you get there. And, you know, the good thing, and credit to ISP and to AFI, they saw the sense in that particular election in standing aside, you know, and letting Alba run with that. The problem with that, of course, was that Alba was, you know, effectively censored out. I don't think it would have been any different if it had been ISP or AFI. There was a move on, which was bought with the 3 million to keep Nicola's rivals in the background on the independent side. It won't be the same next time because there'll be time to build up, time to organise. The Alba will be much better organised time. It'll have established branches, you know. There was people, you know, being given leaflets and asking, well, who else is going to deliver these leaflets? Well, I'm not sure. We'll send you. We'll send you some information as it comes in. And, you know, it was quite remarkable what was achieved in 6 weeks, but it was nothing near enough. And I think we all knew that that was probably the case, particularly when Alec was blocked from being on the TV programmes. That was the thing that killed it. You need to spark the imagination of the public. And if you're not getting any access to the public, then that's an impossible task.
Yep. Well, there's already, I know, a couple of branches opened up already. There's one up
and
there.
I've been invited to speak to one already.
Yeah, I know that. They wrote, that's a great. They wrote to me to ask me if I could get him to go and speak to them. I'm in the same constituency. They didn't ask me. I'm not forgetting this, Mr. G. You know who I'm talking about. Anyway,
come on. I mean, come on. Who wouldn't have a bit of this?
Anyway, so
But it's
there, yeah,
interesting. It's interesting, Ian, that you spoke about history and splits and stuff and keeping a party together. One of the most interesting historical facts of the SNP is the SNP itself is a fusion, or was a fusion, of two parties, and the tendencies of both of those parties has never really been resolved. The fact that we're talking about the independence fundamentalists and the gradualists, those tendencies have never really changed. And only last year I read for the first time John McCormack's history, what is Flag in the Wind. And within the first two chapters of McCormack's book, he describes how after the fusion of the National Party and was it the Scottish Party, when they came together to become the SNP, one of their first jobs was to start expelling who they described as the wild men of independence. Anyone who said, we want independence as the goal for this party, was drummed out, because the SNP, up until very recently, was effectively a home rule party under the slogan, a better deal for Scotland. A better deal for Scotland isn't independence. An independent country doesn't need a better deal. It has the best deal. And we seem to forget this, that there is a historical current within the SNP that isn't necessarily pushed on independence. And the failure of Nicola Sturgeon to accommodate the wild people of independence, her failure to accommodate them has largely been responsible for the ISP, for the AFI, for ALIPA, and the next 16 that are going to appear over the next 5 years. She has sown the seeds of her own destruction by not managing those tendencies. She's chosen one that didn't mention independence until Alex Salmond appeared, and now it's her favourite word. She refound that word again. But even if these parties don't achieve what they set out to do, their presence in the ecosystem of the independence movement is certainly having the effect I'd like it to see. There's a little fire under their bums now, because they know these movements these other parties can only grow. If we look at what ALIPA is and what it wants to achieve and who it's attracting to people who've lost patience. There's a lot more people going to lose patience in the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's for
the next 30 years. This is what happens. What is it? Poor got off the pot, people.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people who are talking about they're worried that the SNP would settle for super devolution, or whatever the latest name of it is this week. That's a fear of quite a lot of people, and some people who have remained. And as you say, more and more people, I think, will start moving out, and they'll go to either ISP, AFI, ALIPA. And I really do hope that there is cooperation between those parties, particularly in the coming council elections. And of course, we've got an STV system there, and people have, is it 9? You've got 9 votes in the council elections. You get 9 listed.
Single
transferable. God almighty, yeah. We found it hard enough to explain the Hodge system and get that across. We need to, we're going to have to, any of you guys out there who'd like to do the wee graphs and the wee videos about votings, do one in the STV as quick as you like. Let's get it out there. Let's get it started.
Vote to your vote.
But the other thing that's happening that still hasn't, I mean, I think we've touched on it, strength and diversity, I think was certainly under Alex Salmond in the SNP was the great strength. And it was certainly the great strength of the Yes movement during the referendum campaign. But it seems now that it's in the SNP direction, it's narrowed down. And the broader church is out there in those parties that we're mentioning. And I hope they can all come back together again, including the SNP. I hope that Nicola, now that she's found that word again, independence, actually means it and starts doing something about it. Do you feel confident, Ian, that she will?
No, I'm sorry, I don't think Nicola shows any interest whatsoever in following any collective, advance. Nicola's got her programme, and independence is maybe in there. If it is, it's only because of ALPA putting it there. But it's a low priority. She is a devolutionist. She would be happy with an enhanced deal from Westminster. She's quite comfortable being the leader, not having to take any risks. She's a manager, not a leader. She's no inspirational message whatsoever. She does well just now because of COVID and because of the exposure that's given her. But she's not moved independence forward one iota in all these years. There's been no new initiative, no background work. I mean, how do you... It's like, Sooty and Sweet, she's sitting up there with her wand, because she's not doing any work behind the scenes to prepare the economic case, to put together the arguments over currency, over borders, over all the issues which we know will be issues in any, electoral contest for independence. She's not done any of that work. And the one thing she did do was the Growth Commission. She doesn't, she took it to conference. Her currency position was overturned by conference. Her reaction to do nothing about it. And that's led to the Scottish Currency Group being set up by Dr. Tim Rideout. It's got thousands and thousands of members. And they expect the SNP to follow the conference decision and back a separate Scottish currency as a priority. And Nicola is equally insistent that she's not going to do it. So, I mean, if you're suggesting, well, where could the flashpoints go in the next, couple of years? Well, I would suggest the currency is one that could create a big split in the SNP. Nicola's policies on the hate crime bill, GRA, they are going to cause enormous problems.
Well, this was one of the most interesting things I experienced over this campaign. Is I was delighted to be given access to what Alapa was doing, to get in on the media huddle, and what I found surprisingly refreshing and interesting was the amount of times I could, well, not fall out, but disagree with Alex Salmond. We were talking to him, in our huddle, and he would quite often say, Jason, I couldn't disagree with you there in the strongest of terms. I'd stick up, and there'd be a bit of a sparring match. Whereas everything we see coming from Butte House is a bit like the Politburo. It's like the court of Brezhnev. If you disagree with Nicola, and then you sneeze on a train, you're getting arrested. Everyone knows this. There are certain people who get off with, misdemeanors, and then there are people who, well, they get disappeared in the Sturgeonist regime. I think it's true what you say there. If you disagree with what she sees as the best way forward, she will sideline you, she'll ignore you, and she'll go against the majority. Whereas I got an entirely different view of what Salmond was doing when he was willing to, listen to what other people were saying. Bloggers of all people. And more than that, he was willing to cast out the net further and take a bit of disagreement, take advice, and discuss things. I have not seen that once from Nicola Sturgeon since she took power.
There's another big elephant in the room, and that was still the 600,000 is still missing, Ian. And it's still not accounted for. And we know that the inquiry is ongoing, and we know of someone who's been helping with inquiries, not in a criminal way. He's been helping to catch the criminals.
Well, I can give you an update on that. Actually, I think that I had a series of emails sent to me by a lady from Ian McCann, the SNP Chief Operating Officer, who made absolutely clear that she couldn't get her money back because her money was in a ring-fenced fund, which was specifically for Indy Ref 2, and the SNP had no access to that fund, so she couldn't get her money back. Now, I encouraged her to go to the police, but she did yesterday. She came back to me today and told me that the police tried to fob her off by saying it was a civil matter, but she was sensible enough not to accept that, and she is taking the line that someone misrepresenting raising funds in a false manner is a criminal offence, not a civil offence. And her insistence has won out in so much as that between 12 o'clock and 2 o'clock tomorrow, a senior police officer is going to be calling to take her statement. So, you know, if there's anyone out there in a similar situation, you know, if you try to fob you off with telling you it's a civil offence, don't go for it. It's not a civil offence.
Call the number below.
Exactly. Call us. We'll keep you right. You know.
Not that we want to take sides. No.
No. But it's helping the public. It's a public service.
Yeah, but that it is a big elephant in the room. It could crush certain people, which would be sad, wouldn't it? But it really is a problem. But the other thing is we're getting closer, certainly in Scotland, to the end of the COVID crisis. But it's getting closer. I mean, we are. I would think, Barry, would it be fair to say that by the end of the summer, COVID will be a goner? Or at least it'll be under control.
Just as long as Rangers haven't got any more titles to pick up.
Yeah, what can I tell you?
The scenes in Glasgow today were disgusting.
Well, that's an opinion. You want an invite back here or not? I don't know.
Well, you know,
getting that St Mirren jealousy's coming out now.
If you want the truth, you invite me. I'm not going to sit and pander, you know, to the masses out there are bigoted one side or the other.
Oh, now you're talking about masses to me. You're trying to wind me right up there.
We guys who support St Mirren, albeit from a distance, have the ability to look on the rest of Scottish football with a requirement of balance and appreciation. And I just want you to know that if it had been Celtic that were responsible for those scenes, you can be absolutely guaranteed I would have said the exact same thing. Because I'm a fair-minded man.
I was never going to make it.
You pair deserve each other. You're saying nothing because it's Rangers, and he said if it was Celtic, he'd say nothing either. That's why you need me on.
Well, listen, I'll tell you something, Ian. It's never going to be St Mirren.
Oh, no. You can't say that to me. I was at the cup final when St Mirren won the cup.
1943, was it?
No. Well, there's twice they've won it. They won it in 1958, I believe. I wasn't at that one.
Ian Ferguson.
But yeah, Ian Ferguson against Dundee United.
Great Ranger.
It was the worst game of football I've ever watched, but I was just delighted that he scored and we could all go home. I can tell you the truth. But it was good. It was good in Paisley that night. Although it must have been 1983 because I was speaking in Stirling that night where I was the SNP candidate. And I was absolutely distraught because I had to leave Paisley to go to Stirling to speak at a meeting, you know, when the whole town here was bouncing up and down with great excitement.
Well, that sort of took me off my stride there, which was talking about COVID, and we got into the Rangers and St Mirren there. I don't know how we got there, but we did. But it's hopefully by the end of the summer, it should be under control. So I don't want to have a dig at Nicola, but she's used Brexit and to avoid independence. She's certainly used COVID magnificently well to avoid independence and about it. What's she going to use next if COVID's out of the way?
Well, COVID won't be out the way according to Nicola, because Nicola's not talking about it being out the way just for the disease. She's talking about the economic consequences of COVID being over.
This was the thing I had pointed out to people on Twitter, is when she said that she would be focusing on the recovery, people assumed recovery meant the end of the pandemic. But recovery is a funny kind of word. You know, and considering the IMF and a number of other international financial institutions are talking about decades of recovery, you know, she doesn't mean recovery from a virus. What these people mean is recovery for the economy.
And she's going to trust Boris Johnson and the mafia in London. That's what she's sold to the Scottish people. And all of you did the both votes SNP. You backed that. Boris Johnson and the mafia are going to get us out the poo-poo. Not going to happen, folks.
It's ridiculous. And I mean, it's just a signal of how poor Nicola's argument is that she's prepared to sit. And I mean, she's effectively saying without saying that the people best placed to recover the Scottish economy or Boris Johnson.
Exactly.
You know, Rishi Sunak. I mean, for goodness sake, you know, how can you argue for independence and have that as your message? These people are more able. If we want to recover our economy, let me tell you, if you want to recover your own business, the people that are best doing that are the folk that know what assets you have, know what your priorities are, know what your skills are. Certainly have that as the number one issue on the list of priorities. Scotland will never be number one on the list of priorities at Westminster. We'll be lucky to get into the top 100 priorities at any point. And yet, the leader of the Scottish National Party is telling you that's the way forward.
It's
so,
quite
you know,
worrying.
Sooner or later, people are going to realise they're getting sold a pub. You know, I mean, I know some people in Alpha are probably very distraught at the moment and downhearted, but time's on their side. And it's a shorter time than you think. People's patience, you know, has been extended and extended and extended by Nicola. It's always just round the corner. But there comes a point where the elastic gets, you know, it gets too far and it snaps. You know, and there's definitely a danger of that.
I retweeted some wee guy from, I think, 2017. I don't know how it came. It came up and I was searching through old tweets for something. And some guy had responded to me in 2017, you know, with one of those little snarky, trollish comments saying, you know, Jeggett, you've got it wrong. You're always anti-independence. You're always anti-SNP. Don't you worry. Nicola's about to unveil the master plan. 2017. So I retweeted that the other day saying, does anyone remember the master plan?
Yeah, the famous secret plan, Nicola's bag.
Yeah, the sort of stuff people invented in their own heads, and that's it about patience. I bet you that wee guy probably voted Alapa.
Probably one of the founder members. But I take no pleasure whatsoever. And the election turned out exactly as I foretold, and the things that happened would happen, and which I get, like you, I get attacked for, particularly on Facebook, where I am an absolute hero of the SNP folk on Facebook. They love me. Only Ian runs me close as a person for crucifixion. But everything I said would happen happened. And when they're sitting there watching the swearing in on Monday, and they're seeing Annie Wells and all these Morris Gold and all these other Tories getting in, and they're saying, well, how did that happen? Well, I'll tell you what, because you didn't listen to us, and you listened to Nicola and the SN, the both votes, because she was more interested in crushing another independence party than she was in getting a super independence majority. We should already be talking about independence, and we're not. We're talking about defending ourselves. We're coming towards the end of our time today, my friends. It's been a pleasure. What do you see in the next couple of weeks coming ahead of us, Jason?
Nothing. To be perfectly honest, I think there'll be a bit of activity, but I think realistically, if we're talking about the broader project of independence, we are heading into an ice age. Now, hopefully, you know, this is part of the whole cyclical or the whole cycle of the political journey, that there will be deep freezes and then activity in spring times. I think to agree with Stu Campbell, actually, I think after the last election, we are now heading towards a period of cold where things are going to slow down. And the work we're doing in terms of investing our time and energy into other bloggers is about keeping the fire burning. I think that's the most important thing we can do in our little gardens of the movement right now, is to make sure that we don't entirely freeze, deflate, and evaporate. You know, we've done a lot of work, we've built something incredible, and we have a responsibility to keep it alive through what's now going to be quite a long, barren time. But I don't think that that's terminal. I think there will come a springtime again. And as Ian says, these things tend to turn quicker than we expect. So hopefully spring won't be too far away, but it's not going to be in the next couple of weeks.
What about you, Ian? What do you think is...
Well, I mean, I can see where Jason's coming from, and I think politically it's probably correct as far as the politicians are concerned. But if you're right, Roddy, and that the virus is pretty much eliminated by the end of July, then I can see a marching season starting again.
Don't use the word marching season.
Right,
Janie Mac.
right.
Arlene.
I can just see it starting, not in Northern Ireland, here in Scotland. And I think it will be interesting because there's going to be a debate to be had about who the crowd or the message is going to be for. Will it be for Boris Johnson in Westminster? Or will it be to Nicola Sturgeon to get her act together, to put the foot in the accelerator, to drive independence? Now, it may end up being a combination of both, but as long as that element is there, putting pressure on the Scottish Government, forcing them to confront the issue, then I think that's a step forward, and that's something that can happen. So I hope to see and encourage that, and if we can achieve that, then who knows what will happen thereafter.
Yeah, I would imagine. I think the first two, all under one banner, whatever you want to projects, will be Union Jack House in Edinburgh, and I think you're right about either Butte House or Holyrood, where maybe we need to set up a vigil like we did with the Royal High School and demand our independence. I don't know. But anyway, coming to the end, folks, if you've enjoyed this show, I really would like, if you see the subscribe button, if you press the subscribe button. We're trying to get up to 1,000 subscriptions. That opens up all sorts of other doors for us to improve the service to you. And as I said to you earlier, if you fancy a wee shot of doing this, we will make this software available to you to use to do programs for anything that's pro-independence. You're welcome to do that. And any of the bloggers that want to join us in the new Scottish Media Group, get in touch. You know where to find me. You can find me on Twitter at ScottPaul1314. We've got at Jeggett and at Ian Lawson 27, just your age. You'll get any of the three of us there. You'll find us, and but till we speak to you again, keep the comments coming. Tell us what you want to hear. Tell us who you'd like to see. If you'd like the format, or if you'd like to see different things, let us know. We can't do it if you don't tell us. But until we speak to you again, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish prism. Brought to you by BarrheadBoy.